During the reign of Mary I, who was also known as Bloody Mary, the Queen punished many people across her kingdom who did not conform to her Catholic religious beliefs. Many people were burned at the stake in horrific scenes, which terrified the population, and these executions tried to get people to conform to Mary's religious rules and laws. But despite the burnings, there were many more executions carried out, also for crimes such as treason. There were a number of rebellions that Mary managed to see off, including one which she managed to seize the throne from, and this resulted in the execution of Lady Jane Grey, the 9-Day Queen. But there was one man who was the son of an English poet, and a well-thought-of member of Henry VIII's court, who was involved in a rebellion that carried his name. Join us today as we look at the horrific execution of Sir Thomas Wyatt the Younger, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Sir Thomas Wyatt the Younger was the son of the poet Sir Thomas Wyatt, who some historians believed may have had a relationship with Henry VIII's second wife, Anne Boleyn, and Elizabeth Brooke was his mother. He was born to very high-standing parents, and was the oldest of 4 brothers. He was raised as a Catholic, and his godfather was Thomas Howard, the 3rd Duke of Norfolk, one of the most influential men across Henry VIII's court. He did have an input as to how Wyatt was brought up, and Wyatt went with his father to Spain as part of a delegation when the Spanish Inquisition began. But at the age of 16 he married Jane Hort. Following his father's death in 1542, Thomas Wyatt inherited Allington Castle and Boxley Abbey, but these estates were hugely in debt and financial ruin, and with this he was forced to take on the debt and to try and deal with it. He had further financial issues, and was believed to have been a man who had a short temper and was wild and impulsive with his behaviour. For example, during one incident in London, he was accused in 1543, along with other noblemen, including Henry Howard the Earl of Surrey, of making a serious disturbance in London. In the autumn of the same year, the pair joined a group of volunteers who left England to take part in a siege of a French town, but during this military campaign, Wyatt received a lot of accolades for his skill on the battlefield. He took part in more sieges and was given more power and command, and in 1547, when he came back to England, he became a Member of Parliament for Kent. In 1550 he was given the title of the Commissioner to delimit the English frontier in France, but he suffered from illness and could not do this properly. Following the death of Edward VI, it's believed he also helped Queen Mary I in her revolt against the Duke of Northumberland and Lady Jane Grey, the 9-Day Queen. Mary believed she was the rightful heir to the throne, and challenged Jane, and eventually the Privy Council switched their support to Jane, and Mary I had the 9-Day Queen imprisoned inside the Tower of London, and later Lady Jane Grey was executed on Tower Green. However, Thomas Wyatt the Younger would later turn against Mary I. When he travelled to Spain and witnessed the brutality of the Spanish Inquisition, who carried out terrifying public punishment and execution, he began to oppose the Spanish government, the royal family and their ideas. However, Mary I had decided to marry Phillip of Spain, the Prince of Spain who later became the king. With this, Thomas Wyatt viewed the marriage as a betrayal of England, and he never planned to protest against the Queen until he was approached by other noblemen and courtiers who wanted to stop the marriage. The official marriage announcement occurred on the 15th of January 1554, and Wyatt and his rebel friends got together at Allington Castle to talk about how to stop it. Many of his friends were arrested, and Wyatt became the leader of the rebellion. He published a proclamation at Maidstone that his plan to rebel had been approved by people in the Shire, and he tried to raise an army against the Queen's determinate pleasure to marry with a stranger. Thomas Wyatt was a good leader, and the French ambassador backed him, and he managed to get 1,500 men who gathered at his headquarters in Rochester within around 10 days of the rebellion beginning. However, Mary I was informed of the rebels' plans, and she offered a pardon to those who followed Wyatt if they went home within 24 hours, but Wyatt asked his followers to stay and said that support from France would arrive, as well as other uprisings which would back up his initial rebellion. France were not willing to invade and back him up, but the Duke of Norfolk was sent to confront Wyatt and his men. When Norfolk's men saw the rebellion and how big it was, many of them joined, and the Duke was forced to flee. After this, Wyatt and his 4,000 men he had gathered marched throughout Gravesend, Dartford and Blackheath. The government were concerned, and they offered an opportunity for Wyatt to tell the Queen what he wanted. But Wyatt was seen as a disloyal enemy of the Queen, and on the 2nd of February 1554, 20,000 soldiers volunteered to help the Queen to defend against Wyatt and his men. The royal court and the Tower of London were guarded heavily, and reward was offered for people for Wyatt's capture. But during negotiations, Wyatt wanted the Tower of London to be given to him, and the Queen also wanted to be handed over to him. But these demands were considered too shocking and too much, and as he marched into Suffolk, Wyatt found that London Bridge had also been fortified against him. With this he could not get across the River Thames, and other plans were made to capture the Queen's residence of St James's Palace. When the Queen and her government found out about this, they managed to corner him with their defenders, and many skirmishes broke out. Eventually Wyatt was defeated, and he was then arrested and was taken and imprisoned at the Tower of London. On the 15th of March he was placed on trial for treason, but little evidence needed to be brought forward about this, as it was clear he was guilty of high treason in raising a rebellion against the Queen. There were hopes that Princess Elizabeth, the future Elizabeth I, was involved in the plot, as Mary I could then have punished her or sentenced her to death for treason, but this was never proven. But on the 11th of April 1554, Thomas Wyatt was taken out of the Tower of London to begin his journey towards his execution. He was taken out of his cell at the Tower and was taken under armed guard along the short walk north of the Tower to Tower Hill. This was a place where many people during the Tudor times, such as John Fisher, Sir Thomas More and Thomas Cromwell, lost their heads, and on this day another prominent courtier would lose his life there. Whilst in the Tower he tried to appease his death sentence by speaking with Edward Courtenay, the Earl of Devon, as Wyatt believed he was the original one behind the rebellion and uprising, and he tried to save himself. But as he was led towards a scaffold, there was a huge crowd gathered, and when on the scaffold he confessed it was his fault, and that the rebellion was all of his planning. He did this to allow Princess Elizabeth and the Earl of Devon to be free from any further action or charges. But he had been sentenced to being beheaded and then quartered. It's not believed he was hanged or drawn, but Wyatt lost his head after an axeman took his head clean off with the axe. Following this, his body was then cut up into 4 pieces, and his head was then hung from a gallows that stood nearby. His limbs were then sent to 4 different towns to act as a brutal reminder not to mess with Mary I, and they were displayed in prominent places. However, on the 17th of April, 6 days after his execution, Sir Thomas Wyatt the Younger's head was stolen from the gallows. Sir Thomas Wyatt the Younger was a rebel who decided to rise up against Queen Mary I. He was a man who was seen as a competent military leader, and his uprising served as one of the biggest threats that Mary faced during her time on the throne. He was brutally executed on Tower Hill in front of a large crowd. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.